Hi, I'm Scott Wrighton. I serve as the Decatur City Manager, and it truly is my pleasure to reach out to you through these weekly videos with a little snippet about a couple items that's going on with your city government. As has been announced in the media, the Decatur Park District recently decided that they would not sell the Lincoln Park site to the Decatur Public Schools. We respect that decision. The City of Decatur was never asked to weigh in on whether or not that should be sold or not by the Decatur Park District or by the Decatur Public Schools. The City of Decatur never received any plans, any kind of formal submission to us for evaluation. It certainly is true that as the school district, in the months leading up to their request of the Park District that property be sold to them, certainly did contact the city from time to time about the questions they had about sites, what the property was zoned as, or whether or not the city could help with foreclosure, or if the city had any abandoned or empty properties or vacant properties adjacent to it that we could help them with. And of course, we're pleased to help out with the school district's planning process. But we were never asked to weigh in, and we didn't weigh in on this one either. So we certainly respect the decisions made both by the Park District and by the school district. I think, though, now that this decision has been made, I think that it's useful to say that the city and the school district especially have a story that hasn't been told very well that needs to be told to the citizens of Decatur about the disposition, disposal, and fate, if you will, of some of the older school buildings that have been left over the course of many years, not just recently, but over several years. Woodrow Wilson's gotten a lot of attention. It's not the only one. There's also Copenbarger. There's also Old Durfee School that the school district sold many years ago to developers who made lots of promises and nothing happened with them, and they became derelict structures. The school district and the city have worked together to try to make thoughtful decisions about the disposition of schools that are taken out of the district's inventory, how they run programs there, and which schools they have. Those are the school district's decisions, but what they do with schools that are taken out of inventory does affect our neighborhood revitalization and neighborhood improvement programs. So I appreciate the fact that we've had that dialogue. The school district has taken down Old Oak Grove School. They've taken down Johns Hill. They've taken down the old Southeast Elementary School, and there's more to come. And we're working with them with an outside developer for the repurposing and reuse of the old Garfield School at the corner of Oakland and West Grand. I'm not going to take any more time in this video to go into details, but I do want to say that I think there's a story that should be told for citizens about what has been done and what needs to happen going forward so that old school buildings don't become a drag on the city's efforts to revitalize moving forward. The next topic I want to talk about is the fact that, like so many other communities in downstate Illinois, Decatur needs more police officers. We have instituted programs to have a signing bonus for new officers, and we've instituted 12-hour shifts, which give people more time off, even though they work the same number of hours. It's actually a recruiting tool. We've brought on some outside consultants to help us who are specializing in this kind of recruiting. But even before pandemic changed the equation about, and other discussions about law enforcement nationwide changed this discussion, we've always found that someone who has some kind of a connection to the community or to the region, either because they went to school there, they have family there, they grew up at least in part there, they have some connection, that makes for a longer serving officer. So we've also made some changes in the recruitment process. Years ago, it used to be that only a few times a year there'd be a big testing time and hundreds of people would come in to take the police exam. Not anymore. If you're interested in being a police officer, and I hope that there's people that are seeing this video who are interested in making a difference in their community by being a police officer, you can contact the police department. We can get you through the initial testing, which can be done online. There's a physical test and some other and an interview, all of which can take place in about a week if it's really accelerated. It can happen really fast. It didn't used to in the past. Now, the biggest time constraint to getting people into the system is the time that it takes to wait for the next police academy. But we're fortunate to have a police academy, one of the few in the state, right here in Decatur, in part through the generosity and the thoughtful planning of the Howard Buffett Foundation, which guarantees the city of Decatur a certain number of slots in that academy with each turn. So, but we still have, it's still, 4 3 or 4 times a year that academy takes place, and so we have to wait for that. But it's a lot easier to get through the process. So give some consideration to making a difference in your community. It might be hard work, but doing something that's really worthwhile sometimes does require that. But we've made the process of getting you through through the system of review and vetting and making sure that you're qualified to be an officer a lot easier. Finally, I want to say that the mayor and city council of Decatur have been extremely supportive of the police, in part because that's not misplaced. We have made changes in the professionalism and the training of our police officers, so that many of the changes that were recommended as a result of some of this police reform discussion that's happened nationally had already been put in place in the Decatur Police Department well ahead of time. This is a good organization that does good work, and I think that if you're at that point in your career, early in your career, want to think about being a police officer, making a difference in your community, you can really do that. So contact the police department if that's something that you're interested in, or the city's Human Resources Department. I'd also like to give you a short update on the efforts of the city and some of our partners in government in Macon County to make sure that whatever ambulance service comes after Decatur Ambulance Service will be handled seamlessly and in a way that improves access to that very critical public safety resource. The owner of Decatur Ambulance Service, which is HSHS St. Mary's, gave us notice some time back that they will be getting out of the ambulance business. They gave us lots of notice, and they've also committed to the community that they will make that a seamless transfer, not just decide to close the doors arbitrarily at some point. And the reason that this falls in the city's lap is because the city issues the licenses to ambulance companies to operate in our city. So what we've done is we contacted about 10 ambulance companies. Some of them said that they weren't interested, and that's fine. And as of the end of this week, we'll have all the proposals from those companies that are planning to submit proposals. We already have several of them, and I can tell you that we will have at least 2 ambulance companies that will receive licenses from the city of Decatur. We've already called a hearing for early in August, which is required by the code, and after that hearing is completed, we'll begin issuing licenses, and have already begun the process behind the scenes of doing some interviewing, and then that'll become more public once we get into August, so that the decision, I expect, will be made in August in a way that will not make it that difficult for us to have as seamless a transfer as possible. There will be some changes to make. The fact that just of having more than one ambulance company will mean that dispatching arrangements are different, but the folks down at the Central Illinois Regional Dispatch Center have been involved in this discussion as well. So all the key players are meeting, and I want to point out as well that those key players include those who provide emergency services outside the city of Decatur in what I call Greater Macon County, because the service area of Decatur Ambulance included all of Macon County, not just the city of Decatur. So we're pleased and fortunate that our partners in public safety and those agencies around the county outside of the city of Decatur have been at the table with us and helping make those decisions and really approach the ambulance EMS service area as the whole county, not just the city of Decatur, even though the city of Decatur's authority to issue licenses only applies inside the city of Decatur. So in summary, so far so good. Last, I want to talk a little bit about some transportation projects, really in the context of how over the last several decades, and this is not unique to Decatur at all, more and more power and decision-making is being shifted to state governments and especially to the federal government. And it means that there's a loss of control by local governments. The examples of that I want to mention today have to do with 2 topics that I've also touched on in some of these videos in the past, and that has to do, number one, with the problem we have with the Norfolk Southern Railway constantly blocking railroad crossings for prolonged periods of time, sometimes many hours, because they're bringing in trains that are too long, and they can't break them fast enough to get them into the Decatur rail yard, and the citizens suffer. At points like the Wood Street crossing, the Rock Springs crossings, and those are the 2 worst ones, and others. The federal government has preempted both local and state control over this matter, and so far the federal government hasn't been willing to say you can only make trains so long, or you can only block these at-grade railroad crossings for a certain number of minutes, after which you have to break them. And the railroad, in this case specifically the Norfolk Southern Railroad here in Decatur, has taken advantage of that. It's an example of what happens when there's no longer enough local and state control to deal with problems that really are local and state oriented. So our recourse is going to be to seek out the assistance of our senators and our congressmen, and they've been responsive, but it always takes longer when we have to go that route. So please know that the next time you're sitting for too long at one of these rail crossings, that your city government is trying to do this and trying to work with our federal legislators, but so far both the state government has determined this is a federal matter, and here locally the Norfolk Southern has largely been unresponsive to our requests. In fact, they've even failed to meet their own promises. They've said if it's going to sit at a crossing for more than 30 minutes, we will break it, but they don't. And so with this loss of federal control, it just means it takes us longer to go to the federal government and get relief. One of the other outcomes of loss of local control has been the delay that we've experienced with the Highway 51 project. Now, there's an upgrade of 51 already happening north of Pershing Street, and we'll schedule to start later this year yet on the south part from just north of the dam all the way south of the city limits. But the piece in between, and particularly the piece between El Dorado and Pershing, which is where the driving surfaces are clearly the worst, has been delayed because it has taken us a long time to convince the Illinois Department of Transportation that a different design approach needs to take place. It's too wide, they need to reduce the lanes, and in the interest of advancing the City Council's objectives for neighborhood revitalization, we want to change the whole way that streetscape looks. And the Department of Transportation has resisted that, and to the point that it has added about 2 years to the project. So we have succeeded in getting them to redesign it more in accordance with the City Council's neighborhood revitalization, pedestrian access, hike-bike beautification, better lighting, more green spaces so that it doesn't do as much economic damage to the adjoining structures and so forth. But it has added 2 years to the project. And we have even had problems getting them to fix it in the meantime. So that's why especially the southbound section of 51 is so difficult. You can rest assured that your city government is working as closely as we can with IDOT to get them to move along faster. But in this day and age when both the state and federal government take more local decision making away from local governments, this is the byproduct of that. And so we're working through it. It just means that, as with railroad crossings, it takes a little bit longer. Thank you very much for tuning into the video and giving me this opportunity to tell you more about what's going on with your city government, and I look forward to doing it again next week.